Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to win the SaMD race. So basically today, what we're doing is using the metaphor of a Formula One race team, which is one I used in a previous presentation, which seemed to resonate with certain people because in some ways the dynamics between cloud medical device software deployment and Formula One racing is similar in the way you design, you deploy, you repeat, and you do it over and over again. And the way you tool and train your teams is really, really, really important for your outcome. So Formula One is a metaphor for cloud SMD. I don't watch Formula One. I don't know a lot about it particularly. But generally, you've got one fast and furious product, which is your device. You'll design that product once, you will release it once, and you just repeat doing that until either you've got success, and if you've got success, you've got to keep doing it, or you fail and you shut down your servers. So the race never ends. And really, I think one of the key points I want to get across in this presentation is that cloud medical device software design, development, deployment, it's different to traditional device manufacturing. And there's a lot of reasons why we are driving this point home, because there's a lot of traditional manufacturers moving into cloud software. And then there are startups building cloud software, they're software companies, but they're getting advice from people or from software vendors which have never done cloud software. So they're getting maybe the wrong advice. But let's dive into it and let's see what happens. But before we begin, I just want to introduce my co-host today, Marvi. Marvi is a brilliant developer. He's a scientist. He's got experience in IVD and medtech. He's trained in machine learning and bioinformatics. And we've recently connected over the last month or two and had some very interesting conversations. And I think one of the things we align so well is because we both develop software. So I have an ISO 13485 team. Marvi will introduce himself. He's got his own team. And I think in this space, it's really important to people who work with people who are going to advise or help you, who actually understand the software development process from the inside. So that said, Marvi, would you mind doing a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Thanks, Richard, for the kind introduction. Yeah, I'm Marvi. I'm based in Vienna, Austria. I am a licensed medical device manufacturer myself, with a background of already deploying quite some AI medical device software in the EU market. Most of my contributions towards my customers are mainly involving around restructuring medtech organizations post-acquisition if they got acquired. I'm assisting some SMEs if they outsource their software development team, either as a head of product or a product owner, to regain control over their development and compliance. I'm also coaching and supporting when it comes to product strategy, developing the right AI medical device, especially spin-offs who stuck in the feasibility phases for like years, right? So my main motivation, I'm actually really thrilled to collaborate with Richard, is we want to establish a community, a platform that incorporates diverse frameworks to share our experience or expertise with digital health entrepreneurs. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Marvi. So Marvi's going to sort of curate questions. So if you've got questions, please drop them in the chat. And yeah, we will see Marvi at the end. So thanks very much. So we'll start the presentation then. Oh, sorry, just quickly before we start the presentation, we've recently started a medical device software professional network. And the goal here is actually to support the individual practitioners who deal with medical device software. So there's 3 levels here. There's the patient, there's the companies, and there's the people working on the products. In my experience, I think I've met a lot of these people consulting, really great people, but they could use a little bit of help. So what we're doing at the low price of 90 francs a year, which in Switzerland for some of the big consulting companies will get you 20 minutes of consulting. We're creating a membership club, and we'll have a Git repo where we'll share a bunch of resources that you can clone, contribute to, which should be useful for your career. And we'll expand that depending on the needs of the members. We're going to have weekly interactive Zoom calls, one for the USA and one for the EU, where we can dive deep on themes, and the agenda will be set by the members. I'm also thinking about doing a daily stand-up, just being online. If anybody wants to join and chat, we can do that. I'm very happy to share real-life examples from my own project, my own technical file. I'm not shy about that because I think that's where I've been my laboratory, to be honest, to upskill myself. And this is really important maybe for QARA professionals who haven't been involved in software deployment to get their hands on some of this stuff, get involved in testing, release, planning cycles. And where this is going, where Marvi and I really want to do is build your own software as a medical device training course, where we'll take participants through the whole software lifecycle management using the Agile toolset with real code, real documentation, and get developers who may have never done documentation to take them through down the design V from requirements into detailed design. And for QARA professionals who may have never handled code, actually get them to merge code, do pull requests, build apps, and if they want, they can even launch it to Google Play, etc. So really, one of the big problems I've seen is a bit of a disconnect between legacy QARA professionals and agile development teams who come from outside the industry. And one's down the V, one's up the V, but they have to really be able to speak well. So that's where we're leading towards. And if you join, we're looking for people to pilot the program, and that's how you'll potentially be one of the first participants and help us to shape this. So if you'd like to join up, go to the website. It's kochsamd.ch/join. There's a Stripe payment form, and if you sign up, I'll be in contact with you. And we start the first calls next week, and we'll start building out the infrastructure for the group next week as well. So now it's on to the presentation. Well, it's not quite quickly, represents my views only. It's not advice, it's not consulting, and it's really for educational purposes only. Obviously, I stand behind it because this is what I do. So let's start with traditional design. So in the physical product world, you design once. So here we've got some form of BMW being made, the clay model in the lab. And traditional devices generally have longer development cycles. You design once, and then once you transfer to manufacturing, guess what? You produce multiple units of exactly the same item. So you design once, produce many, and there's a lot of focus on replication of that design in manufacturing. So you want to produce every individual unit has to comply to the design. So that's a very quick overview of traditional product design and development and manufacturing. However, if you apply the same thinking to the cloud business, you're going to crash. And unfortunately, I've seen multiple examples of this in startups and large companies where QARA departments, not assigning blame here, it's just the way things were done, or they got a bit of bad advice, would try to apply the same sort of thinking to their cloud software products. And unfortunately, it doesn't work, and projects can go off track really, really quickly. And either, I think as Marvi alluded to, where he comes in to fix projects, they have these incredibly long development cycles where products never get released, Or, if you do release, you have a highly non-compliant product, even if the engineering is good, the engineering safe, your technical file doesn't support the quality of the work done. So cloud software is a little bit more like Formula One, where your prototype is your product. You have one car, team working on it. It's a little bit like the pre-industrial age, where you have craftsmen which work on one chair, one table, one candlestick, and sell that, and then move on to the next. But you build your hand-built product in the factory, and then you release it onto the track. And just like software, your first increment is the biggest. You need to design it, you need to develop it, build all the parts, screw it together, and then you put it on the track. So the biggest increment is the first one. But then you go into race season, and it's ruthless. You've got the same car, you take it to track A, track B, track C. And if I understand correctly, pretty much by the time people are leaving the stands to get in their cars to go home, the race teams are packing these cars up, putting them in cargo containers, and getting them ready to ship to the airport where the plane's waiting to take them to the next track. And when I first sort of presented this idea, this analogy, I actually got a lot of very strong feedback where they recognized the style and the pace in medical device software development, because you really got one code, you add bits, you remove bits, you change bits, and you're constantly going through these ruthless and time critical and non-stop releases. And just like in Formula One, we have Formula One do pit stops. So within maybe a minor release, if the season is a major release, the race is a minor release, a pit stop could be a patch release. So there's always things we need to do in our cloud software. There could be a security patch, maybe there's a performance issue, there's something that doesn't really change the design, but we have to fix things when it's live. We need to get into our, do these fast updates to our cloud software. And unfortunately, I've cut the picture down, but I think if you look at the whole picture, the fastest pit stop they do is roughly around 1.5 seconds. I can't remember if it's 1.37 seconds or 1.73 seconds, but you've got roughly 10, 20 people around the car, each focused on a specific task, which together means that tires are changed, fuel is filled, the driver, I guess, gets a drink, however it works, and people are very coordinated and very accurate and very specific on their tasks, which we'll come back to sort of towards the end. But this sort of level of coordination, accuracy is what we need to get to with our medical device software development teams. So in summary, with cloud software, just like a Formula One car, you design once, you release once, and then you repeat over and over again. As like I said, hopefully successful, it goes on forever, and you've got the best software in your class for your industry. Or unfortunately, a lot of startups who fail. A lot of startups fail before they even get on the track. They don't get out of the factory. And again, this is one of the reasons why this is really important topic to discuss. There is a philosophical issue here, which is a little bit of a side note. There is a philosophical thought experiment. If you have a wooden ship and you replaced every plank and structure in that ship, every sail over time, is it the same ship? It looks the same, but every part's been changed. And our medical device software is a little bit like that. Maybe not that extreme. You always got core parts of your code you probably don't change, but who knows? Given enough time, maybe you do. We're constantly recreating our products. And as Marvi pointed out, there's something called apotheosis, where the cells in our hand, I don't know the time, but every few years, basically, you've got like fundamentally a biologically new hand made of completely new cells. But hey, to us, it looks exactly the same. Bit of a side issue. So what does that mean? Here, I'm trying to demonstrate the relation between the volume, or the ratio between your device master record, your device history record. We'll do history file or batch. So in traditional manufacturing, you'll have one device master record and you will do many, many batches based on that. When I was a supply manager for our topical dermatology business, before I got into software, our technical file really didn't change. Occasionally there were label updates, but they were very, very minor. But the fundamental formulation, the packaging, the plastic we use for the packaging, or those specifications, the manufacturing processes didn't change, and we could produce more or less the same product over and over again, literally millions and millions of tubes, without touching the master file, which is a really great business to have, let me tell you. However, if you're in the cloud medical device software, it's not like that at all. You have a one-to-one relationship between your master record and your history file, and then you update the master record and you release the next one. And this is really fun. It's very obvious, I know, but it's one of these philosophical points where, in my experience, I'm not sure that not everyone, senior leadership understands. While they may understand it, they may not understand the implication of it. And in my mind, the seriousness is almost at the board and investor level, that it's a generational thing. I'm 50 now. I've transitioned from the analog to the digital world, and it was a hard journey. It really was. Now I'm across the line. I have a lot of empathy for people who may not have made that journey yet, and we have a responsibility to get them across, because their businesses and their patient safety really, really rely on it. And yeah, we'll get into that in a bit in the future, but this one-to-one relationship and the pace of updating your master record per release is very, very different to these very slow-moving technical files where you can use old tools, you can use Word, you've got the time to do the reviews, you just don't have it for your software. So the message is velocity matters. So it's a turtle and hare race. The turtle is your traditional device where you may update once a year, once every few years, who knows. Where your cloud is a hare race where you're updating, depending, let's say, for example, you're a medical device app and you need to keep your app store optimization rankings going. You need to be releasing every 4 to 6 weeks. If you're not that, then you're probably updating a few times a year, probably once a quarter, if not more. And there was one client I had, they had the ambition to release daily, have a daily release train, which I believe is possible to deliver compliant software daily, and it's a really great ambition to have. But just like in planning a factory where you plan production maybe 6 months out, if you want to get to that level of high velocity deployment, you really need to look at your planning abilities in addition to how you're going to deploy your code and your compliant documentation. But there's a very exciting, ambitious theme, which I think is eminently doable. So the implications are, in my view, your technical file toolchain has to be the same as your coding toolchain. The ability to manage the compilation of very complicated text has been solved, and the answer is pretty much Git controls. And anything that's not Git for your documentation, especially your high velocity documentation, such as Word, definitely not Word. Confluence is better, but it still has problems. But compiling your content through a Git methodology gives you that line-by-line review and control, and makes life a hell of a lot easier, because you just have to focus on the change with the confidence that the other areas haven't been touched. Now, your documentation doesn't compile and run like software does, but I think with AI, there's a lot of tools that exist today that are coming that you'll be able to implement some level of AI review to give you even more insight and confidence on the quality of your documentation and the compliance of your documentation. So, a big gateway to those AI tools is having the content of your technical file in the right format so it's accessible to the AI. And this slide here is just an attempt to look at technical file velocity. So the way to interpret this, across the top, you've got the steps, which are broadly the IEC 62304 steps, where you go from planning, requirements, okay, that's an 82304 step, into software requirement specifications, detailed design, code, all the way up to release. And the white line is an index to say, to do the update to the document, once per release. So if you're on the white line, you're doing it once per release. If you're above the white line in the red, you're doing it at least once per release, if not more. And if you're in the green line, you're doing it maybe less than once per release. So in my view, the planning, your plan needs to be updated at least once per release. If you're doing fast development cycles, you really don't have time but to do it once per release. An example of that would be, in terms of your traceability and validating your tool chain for your release. If you, for example, have preset filters for your Jira, which generate traceability reports, you need to update those filters, you need to validate your tool chain. All that has to happen once per release. If you look at requirements, it's not quite as strict as I'm going to say it, but generally your requirements will only be updated maybe on your major upgrades, because if you're updating requirements, you generally, almost as a rule, need to carry out validation on those requirements. So you won't be doing that every release. But if you get into specs may change, but definitely on the detailed design, that's what determines what you're coding. That will be updated every release. And again, you're going to be coding every release, integrating, QAing, doing verification testing before release. Validation, you're not going to do that every release particularly. And then obviously you're going to be releasing every release. And hopefully you only have to release once. But I think we've all gone through bad releases where you go, oops, something's not right, let's do it again. And you have more than more than one release attempt per release. And we're not going to cover it here, but we'll have a follow-up webinar on this topic, because if you don't want to go the full Git approach, there are sort of areas in your technical file toolchain where you don't have to go the full Git-based approach. So if you're doing reports, which may not get updated every release, if you're comfortable in Word or Confluence, use that, that's great. But I really encourage people to start looking at the Docker's code and then generating reports from tools like Jira, Confluence, where you can, which are really query-based reports. Implication 2, your technical file toolchain must deploy to your document management system or your eQMS. And again, in my experience, this is where I get into nervous conversations with QA/RA, where traditionally QA/RA departments have really held on to their document management system because it gives them a feeling of control, even if there is highly non-compliant documentation in the document management system. And I just want to send the message here: it's not an either/or approach, it's an and approach. You need a highly agile tool chain to be able to deploy quickly and compliantly to your document management system, preferably with an automated build agent, not having some poor employee going file, save as, PDF. And it has to be integrated. So just like you may be deploying some parts of your manufacturing system for your physical manufacturing into your document management system, batch records, these sort of things, and nobody thinks twice about running their whole manufacturing in a document management system. It's exactly the same thing here. We need to really sort of maybe raise the awareness that software has its particular tool chain for the purpose, and we need to start moving the eQMS systems, our QA/RA departments, down more to the Agile tool chain, as opposed to what I've seen more and more where they use not fit for purpose tools. And I think probably it's kind of funny, but it's kind of serious, where in one company, the QA/RA department asked the software team to do approved pull requests in the Pronovia SAP document management system. So if you understand why that could be funny, that's really great. If you don't understand why that's probably not appropriate, I really encourage you not to make fun of anyone. That's not the point. If you don't understand that point, try and work out why that's not appropriate, because these are very dangerous, expensive, unhelpful decisions that are sometimes being enforced by our QA/RA departments. Another one, again, a very simple point, that content and format are two different things. So I'm a bit older now. when I grew up, I submitted my university essays and my mathematics homework assignments on a piece of paper where I wrote in pen. And back then it wasn't possible to separate content and format. And then we moved in this digital world where the digital tools represented a world where at one point we did print a lot on paper. And now, we still use these tools, but really no one ever prints. So the world's moved on and the world is really flipped, where documents or the final format is generated from underlying content. So again, the analogy is we review our code and our compilation of code via the Git tools and via pull requests and testing in the branches, all these sort of things. And we compile it and then we test the compiled version. So there's an analogy there of approving the content and then approving the final version for our code, which kind of is the whole purpose of 62304, formalizing that process. But yet in the quality department for software, often they don't separate the document approval from the approval of the content. And again, this has very serious issues for how efficient you're going to be with your teams, how fast you're going to deploy, and especially when you get into Agile CFR 11 compliance. And there are ways to do it. And I've had some very interesting conversation with consultants or even software companies which are working on solutions for this. It's a bit of a brain scratcher when you get first into it, but there are some really good tools coming. And again, I would strongly suggest you need your technical file in a Git format or something similar, so you can take benefit from this, because as I said before, speed deployment is going to guarantee compliance, and your QA/RA methodologies are not going to slow down the quality or the speed of your products. So we're now on the last slide. So before we wrap up, I'm just going to bring Marvi back onto the screen. Marvi is going to curate questions. So there is a little bit of delay on the LinkedIn chat. So if you do have a question, please, pop it in now. So by the time I finish presenting, they'll be in there. And Marvi, if you could just, maybe prompt the audience by putting something in the chat, that'd be great. So the takeaways are that speed matters. This is really important, that Agile deployment is really about the accuracy and the speed of your code deployment. And our technical file tool chains have to be able to match the velocity of our code. And our Word documents, even Confluence, struggles at times. But if you're looking at upgrading your tool chain or implementing a new one, the velocity of your code deployment has to be taken into consideration, because your documentation speed has to match it. Second one, your eQMS vendors won't save you. There are products out there which claim to be integrated with Agile tools such as Jira, etc. I've looked at a few of them. I've had customers which use some of them. In my humble opinion, none of them really compete with the Agile tools. And I would suggest the best approach is to deploy from Agile tools into your eQMS or into your document management system. But once you get into this hybrid set, I think you're going to build a rod for your back, and it may not work. And these investments are really, really important. And I know there are some tools coming where which are going to be more integrated into the Git or Jira tools, which is the way of the future. And I've heard stories of QA/RA people losing their jobs because of the wrong toolchain choice. And I've actually seen the economic impact of the wrong tool choice in companies, because it really does slow down software projects. Number 3 would be to encourage QA/RA leaders to implement what I'm calling a QuaRops approach to their organizations. So in software development, you've got DevOps, which really support the development of your code and your software products. And QA/RA leaders, I'll be a little bit general here. I make a little joke. They have really great systems for 2006, right? So, you know, for the technology that existed 20 years ago, they were pretty good, but life has moved on. And, you know, areas of planning tools, planning documentation, just generally in your QMS or specifically on your technical file toolchain is really important. And as we said, you know, these tools which allow you to compile very complex and large sets of documentation text are available, and the automation tools exist to deploy them. But, you know, the QARA people need to really complement their skill set with skills from the DevOps department. And there's a question there strategically for companies, because, you know, traditionally IT departments manage the eQMS systems. You know, if you're a cloud software development company and you do have an IT department, who is going to better serve your QARA? Is it your DevOps skill set or is it your IT skill set? And I can't answer that question for you. The answer depends, but I would probably lean towards you know, more more DevOps for the compilation of documents, whereas the actual management of these archiving systems or eQMS is probably more your IT departments. And finally, just like we saw, you know, with the Formula One teams, they don't achieve 1.7 seconds pit stops without planning, training, and practice. You know, for cloud software deployments, you know, you're not going to be compliant and fast without planning, training, and practice either. And the software development plan has to be a lot more than just a compliance tick in the box. It really has to become the operational playbook for the product, the team, and ultimately the company, because, you know, this is the one where you need to plan well, you need to make sure that your roles are well defined in your QMS, that you debrief after every release, and you go to this continuous improvement. And even, you know, if you've got a large first deployment, practice your releases internally before you release as well. So by the time the big day comes, when race day comes, there's no unknowns. Everybody knows what they need to do, and you've really invested in the teams and the processes. So with that said, we've come to the end of the 30 minutes. The presentation is finished. Just want to see, Marvi, have we got any questions that come through the chat?
There's currently none.
Okay. Have you got any sort of comments or builds you'd like to make while we're waiting to see if there's any questions, Marvi? I know I'm putting you on the spot. We didn't plan this before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very looking forward to the upcoming series of this, because I think, and I've spoken to quite a lot of manufacturers, what their experiences are with some many regulatory consultancy companies. They're just quite a lack of understanding of how it really differentiates between a physical medical device and how to do it with software as a medical device. And many of those consultancies tend to transfer their knowledge from the physical medical device into the software, rather than learning from the software developers themselves of how they work, right? So many try to mandate, okay, this is how my experience is of developing a hardware or an IBD device. So this would be the same process and structure of how you should do it for software development as well. But that's not the case. That's why I'm really looking forward to the series.
Yeah, and I think the story, I think you may have shared that with me, with, again, keeping confidentiality. But, you know, a company that you were brought in to remediate had spent maybe $1 million or so on a eQMS, which failed. Not only failed in its intended use, I believe, but all, you know, it really, well, you can tell the story as I understand it, it actually stopped the ability of the company maybe to deploy software. So, you know, these are live issues which you've seen firsthand. Is that correct? Could you share maybe a little bit of your experience there?
That's right. I have been. So firstly, there's actually one question from Richie Christian. So should we introduce that first, or should we?
Yeah, let's take the question. And yep. let's do that, and then you can
So,
answer after. Yep.
we should ask, what are some practical ways in which Quora professionals can upskill on modern software development tool chains? So,
Yeah. So I think the answer is, so if we take my story, I was the audience that I'm trying to help now because I decided I wanted to move from physical into software, and I learned by doing. So basically, paying developers, creating a team, getting help. And let me tell you, I would not recommend that. So that's one way. Go and develop your own software and work it out yourself, which, today is maybe affordable. The second one is, I think, all these tools are free online. So you can sign up to a Jira account, a Confluence account, a Git account. There's YouTube videos. You can self-learn. That will address probably a big need, which is how these tools work. And I would really strongly encourage anyone, if you don't understand Git controls, start with Git controls, because it's a little bit like 3D chess, 4D chess when you start, because it doesn't work at all like a Word document. And yeah, it's really screwed with my mind, put it that way. Maybe I've got learning defects. So I would really get ahead in that. Learn how to do traceability reports in Jira and Confluence, for example, or some other tools. Do some agile project management. But I think this touches on the point of why Marvi and I want to do a hands-on build your own medical device software course, from requirements to release, to take people step by step through the process. Because from what we can tell, no one is offering that at the moment. And it really is the best way to do it. You need to handle the tools, you need to be the developer, you need to compile the software, write the requirements, create the reports, do all of these steps that Marvi and I do every day, to really get that experience. And then obviously, another reason I've created this professional group is to provide support to QARA people. So if they do come across issues that they're not getting support for, they can either contact me or somebody else in the group to get practical advice, so you can take it back to your day job. So you don't have to guess, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but basically you get the help you need. So yeah, in summary, do it yourself. Obviously your network, and Marvin and I are trying to fill the gap to support QARA professionals in that space. Marvi, have you got any build you'd like to make on those points?
yeah, one thing that I really need to emphasize is what I experience is, companies think that there's only one way to provide document control. I've seen this quite a lot of their processes, that it should be only this and only that. But um, you can, in your SOP, you can provide different ways of how you do or you process documents. If a software developer would do it in Git, then you would just write how the process there is. And if a sales guy would have a different, like, it's not only one way you can do document control, but in multiple ways. You just need to justify and document it in your process. So yeah, and coming back to what Richard mentioned, I have experience in one of um, companies that wanted to scale up their medical device team or unit. There were multiple departments, and one of my tasks was to coach the quality management team of how to um, establish an efficient, lean quality management system. But one thing is that the responsible person of the quality management didn't want to really quite understand um, how fast-paced medical device software development works. And then this person decided to um, purchase a very expensive and tedious quality management system, with it really leads to first costing like $500,000 a year just to set it up, to train the people, and then to maintain the system. And the second thing is, yeah, like it was so complicated that they have to cancel and they have to discontinue the setup quality of the quality management system and get a new perspective. So imagine you already spent like already almost $1 million setting it up for more than a year, and then you have to discontinue it. So imagine if you don't have the capacity, which 90% of the digital health or medical device entrepreneurs in the Europe, right? You don't have $500,000 of investment just for documentation. So yeah, that is my takeaway.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that, because I think once you get into if you're a software company, the skill exists in-house to configure these tools, and I'm sort of the view it's cheaper to employ a dedicated DevOps person, call them QuarOps person, or expand some support from your DevOps teams to run your technical file tool chain, and then build the build agents to deploy into your eQMS, than it is to rely on the vendors. And as I said before, there's one software project which is a Git-based project. I haven't seen it yet; it's not quite ready, but I've spoken to the company founder, and I think there's going to be a bunch of tools coming which will be more geared towards the medical device industry and will act like plugins, just like there's a bunch of plugins in Jira, Confluence, Git, etc., that we can actually use. So we can pick and configure our tool chains, and therefore we're not locked into any one model. So if it doesn't work, fine, we swap it out, we change it, because again, we need this configurability, because at this point where we're at, we kind of don't know what's coming. AI is very, very interesting. I use AI a lot for my marketing now, for example, for my product. It's like really, really powerful. It's a force multiplier on productivity, but I don't trust it. I look at the draft, but I review it and verify and validate everything to make sure it's correct, because it's wrong. And there's a lot of AI tools available now for coding. So we're experimenting with Copilot at the moment to see what that can do. But we'll see where that goes. So there's a lot of tools coming with productivity, which is going to accelerate the speed of code development exponentially. And the QARA departments, like, again, there's a huge opportunity here, really. And for me, this is strategic, it's competitive, and really should be a board issue, where if the QARA department can support, keep up with the velocity of the code deployment. So, you pull request. I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago on pull request as the main control. Once you do that pull request, you merge your code. You need to be making sure that that ticket is compliant, is traced all the way back up to requirements, the documentation's done, whatever it is. And then you move on to the next branch. So, stack branches, but you're not stacking just code branches, integrating. When I say stack, I mean integration. You're integrating documentation branches, and you need to get to this incrementalism of your documents. And it's really simple because we do it in our code, but we really need to support our QARA professionals. And again, I think I consulted mainly at software teams, and we progressed a little bit, or there's some learnings, but I'm really changing my approach to supporting individual professionals. And I think where we'd like to go with this training is actually to do some of this training with leadership teams and boards, because they really need to be upskilled in learning where the world is going, especially medical device software. Okay, lecture over. Marvi, any more questions?
I think we covered up for this phase. I think there will be quite some questions following in the series, right?
Yeah, so if anybody wants to speak to Marvi or me, you can find us obviously on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out. I'm very happy to speak to anyone. We also run a WhatsApp group, so you can feel free to join that, dedicated for SaMD. As we said, got the new medical device professional group on my website, so you can go there and take a look, cochsamd.ch. But anyhow, likewise, wish you all the best with your projects. Thank you very much for taking the time to join today. There's a lot of things you could be doing, and you chose to be here. And yeah, wish you a good evening. Marvi, you want to say goodbye?
Thank you for participation and have a great week ahead.
Great. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.